When I got married, I didn't mention that I'd inherited 3 apartments from my grandmother. And thank God I kept quiet. Just a week later, my mother-in-law showed up with a notary. But before we go on, drop a comment with your name and where you're from. I jumped at the sound of the persistent doorbell. I grabbed a towel, quickly dried my hands, and rushed to the hallway. Who on earth is knocking this early? I mumbled, even though it was already 10:30. But in those first few days after the wedding, morning still felt way too early. Nathan and I had been staying up late talking, watching movies, having romantic evenings. Before I could even unlock the door, my mother-in-law, Margaret Thompson, was already standing there, fully armed, perfectly styled hair, a sharp pantsuit, and a serious look on her face. Next to her stood a short man, looking down at the floor and shifting uncomfortably from foot to foot, holding a leather briefcase. From his appearance, it was obvious he was either a notary or some sort of lawyer. Neatly combed hair, formal jacket, folder under his arm. "Victoria, hello, dear," Margaret announced in a tone that left no room for discussion. "We need to talk. This is Samuel Wilson, the notary of a family friend. I decided it's time to sort out a few things." My heart sank. What could she possibly want to sort out a week after the wedding? I thought, forcing a polite smile. Anxiety twisted in my stomach. I still hadn't told anyone about the inheritance, 3 apartments in different parts of the city, all from my grandmother. It wasn't because I was greedy. I just hated when people started digging into your finances. And more than anything, I didn't want my relationship with Nathan to be influenced by my real estate. I wanted him to love me for me, not for the square footage. "Good morning, Margaret," I said as cheerfully as I could, letting them into the apartment Nathan and I now shared. "Come in. Samuel, nice to meet you." I tried to stay calm, though my nerves were already on edge. A quick thought flashed through my mind. Was she here to make me sign something? A promissory note? A prenup? It had only been 7 days since the wedding. As soon as they stepped inside, Margaret acted like she owned the place, glancing around to check if everything was in order. Then she gave a sharp wave, like, "Come on, Victoria, seat the guest." Remembering my manners, I invited them to the living room and offered them a seat. I darted to the kitchen to make tea and bring out some cookies. Even though I wasn't exactly thrilled to be serving them, basic hospitality still mattered. "Victoria, where's Nathan?" Margaret asked as she settled on the couch. I asked him to be home. "Nathan had to step out, he'll be back soon," I lied a little. He'd actually just gone to the store and promised to be back in 20 minutes. I just needed time to figure out why she brought a notary into my living room. While I poured the tea, Margaret looked around and, of course, couldn't resist saying, "Things still aren't quite in order here. Young couples never understand how to keep a proper home. But we'll fix that later." I pretended not to hear her comment, gave her a tight smile, and set her cup down. "Victoria," she said in a more formal tone now, "Nathan's father and I thought that now you're part of the family, it's time to take care of some paperwork. You are married now, yes?" "Yes. We just want to avoid any future issues regarding property." So, she motioned to the notary, who looked like he was afraid to sink into the sofa. "Samuel has prepared some documents. We believe it's important to be fair and transparent." I tensed up. This sounded like they wanted me to sign something right here and now. "What kind of documents, Margaret? What exactly are we talking about?" I asked, trying to sound as innocent as possible. "Oh, nothing major," she said casually, "just a prenuptial agreement. And a note confirming that if something ever happens, any property gained during the marriage will be split evenly. We also wanted to clarify just to be sure that you didn't have any significant assets before the wedding." My heart tightened into a knot. There it is, I thought. She's fishing. But I was ready for this. I'd suspected from the start that she wouldn't be able to resist poking around in my private life. "Oh, assets." I smiled. "Well, I saved a bit for the wedding, have a few small savings." Nothing major, really. I see, she replied, and I could tell from her face she either didn't believe me or thought I was hiding something. And what about property? Did you own anything before the marriage? You people are really nosy, I almost said out loud. But I just shook my head gently. No, nothing serious. I used to live with my grandmother, that's all. But she passed away a while ago, and the apartment was small. It went to my parents. I bit my lip, not wanting to go into details. Technically, that apartment really did go to my parents. But the other three, the nicer ones, the ones my grandmother had bought back in the day when she was still running her business, those she left to me. In her will. No one knew except the notary who handled the paperwork. I'd asked him specifically to keep it confidential for now. So, nothing? Margaret repeated, eyes wide, like she couldn't believe someone as plain as me could have married her son. Well then, all good. Samuel, show her the agreement. I took the papers the notary handed me. I skimmed the prenup, in case of divorce, jointly acquired property, nothing too alarming, except one clause jumped out at me: if one spouse, meaning me, is later found to have significant assets, those assets will be considered joint property unless specifically stated otherwise as premarital. In other words, they were trying to trap me. If it ever came out that I had something valuable, it would automatically count as shared unless I declared right now that it was mine before the wedding. But if I said I had nothing, then I was signing away everything. I pretended to read the document very carefully. Meanwhile, Margaret kept talking. Nathan's a good boy, but you know how unpredictable life can be. And you, dear, come from a modest background. Why complicate things? That's why we decided to handle this now, to avoid any arguments later. Anger boiled inside me. So, to her, I was just some simple girl with no name and no status. Fine. But I knew if I told her the truth that I had 3 apartments rented out and was making a very comfortable monthly income, she'd never let it go. She'd probably demand I sign them over to the family, or at least offer them to relatives at a discount. I didn't want that. Most importantly, I didn't want to ruin things with Nathan. He had no idea I was wealthy, and he truly loved me for me. At least, I believed he did. I need to talk to Nathan first, I said firmly, handing the papers back to the notary. I'm not signing anything without him. Margaret bit her lip but quickly composed herself. Of course, talk to your husband. But I'm sure he agrees with me. This is for your own peace of mind. Right, Samuel? The notary nodded awkwardly. He looked at his watch. If we're signing today, we'll need to do it before lunch. I have other meetings after that, he said. Just then, the door creaked open and Nathan stepped into the hallway with a grocery bag. He raised his eyebrows in surprise when he saw his mom and the notary. Mom! What's going on here? He set the bag down and looked straight at me. Victoria, what's happening? I just raised my hand slightly, as if to say, don't ask me, I'm just as shocked. That's when Margaret launched into a full explanation for her son, saying she was only trying to look out for his future. She thought it made sense to sign a prenuptial agreement and sort out all the financial matters right away. Nathan listened, his face tense. When she finally finished, he spoke quietly but firmly. Mom, I asked you not to get involved in our relationship. Victoria is my wife, and we'll handle things ourselves. Margaret frowned. Sweetheart, I'm just trying to help. I get that. But you didn't tell me you were coming over. And bringing a notary? That's too much. Too much. Margaret gasped. Nathan, how can you not see? These days, you have to be careful. What if Victoria has hidden debts? Or worse, some unknown fortune that suddenly comes to light. It's better to sort it all out now. He glanced over at me, as if trying to read my face for clues about this so-called hidden fortune. I did my best to stay calm, even though my heart was pounding. If Victoria has something, I honestly don't care," Nathan finally said. "I love her, not her money." "And Mom, seriously, enough." Margaret pouted, clearly offended, but accepted her defeat. "Fine. Do what you want. Samuel, sorry to waste your time." She stood and headed for the door. The notary got up, shrugged awkwardly, and followed her out. I felt such relief when the door finally clicked shut behind them. Nathan came over and hugged me. "I'm sorry she acted like that." "It's okay. I get it, she's just worried. She wants you to have stability and security," I said, trying to be diplomatic. But deep down, I had already made a firm decision: I wouldn't tell anyone about the 3 apartments. Not yet. Keeping quiet was definitely the right move, I thought. And that's how our married life began, with a not-so-subtle warning shot from my mother-in-law. It was just the beginning of a long and messy family saga. Margaret wasn't planning to back off anytime soon. She was determined to control everything: our family, our finances, even what happened inside our home. Her attitude toward me swung back and forth. One day she'd be sweet, bringing flowers, inviting us to dinner, and the next, she'd lash out, criticizing every little thing I did. To tell this story properly, and believe me, there's a lot more to it, you need to know that every chapter of our family life played out like a scene from a never-ending soap opera. And like any good soap opera, it was all about secrets, drama, and messy emotions. And yes, I had a major secret: the apartments my grandmother left me. But let's go back a bit. My life before Nathan was pretty normal. I grew up in a family of engineers. My dad was an electrician, my mom a design engineer. They both worked at the same factory. We weren't rich, but we got by. I finished school, got into university to study economics, and worked part-time at a small clothing store so I wouldn't have to rely on my parents for money. My family was fairly easygoing, especially my grandmother. She raised me to be independent and confident, always telling me I could achieve anything I set my mind to. My grandmother was a unique woman. Back when times were tough, she and my grandfather did all sorts of side hustles: sewing clothes, trading rare items under the table. It brought in money, but it was risky. When the economy picked up, she started a small business, buying cheap apartments here and there, renting some out, flipping others. She had a sixth sense for real estate and a bit of luck too. Toward the end of her life, she decided to make a will, but she kept it secret from everyone. My parents didn't approve of her past, gray area, business tactics, so their relationship was always strained. But she loved me and trusted me. A week before she passed, already knowing her time was short, she asked me to meet with her notary. There, I signed the documents making me the sole heir to 3 apartments. The will stated I could only take ownership after her death. After she passed, I followed all the legal procedures and officially inherited the properties. But I didn't tell anyone. There was no need. My parents thought the apartments had been sold or left to someone else. I think my grandmother wanted to avoid drama and infighting, and honestly, I think she was right. She left them to me because she believed I'd manage them wisely and wouldn't let them become the cause of family tension. But the real test of that secret came after I got married. My grandmother had warned me sharp as ever that nothing threatens an inheritance more than greedy in-laws. I used to laugh, thinking she was exaggerating. Greedy? Come on. People aren't like that, I'd think. They'll understand it's mine. But now, looking at Margaret, I was starting to realize my grandmother was absolutely right. I met Nathan in my second year of university. He was a physics grad student, smart, passionate, and, despite being a theoretical physicist, athletic and charming. We became close, started dating. He was incredibly gentle, caring, always joking that I was his muse. I saw how he treated his mother with deep respect. His dad was in the military, often away, so Margaret had raised Nathan on her own, helping him prepare for school and university. He saw her as a saint. So, I understood Margaret was a central figure in his life. What I underestimated was just how much she would try to control it. Nathan and I dated for a long time before we decided to get married. Even during the wedding planning, Margaret was overly involved, insisting on how my hair should look, which flowers to pick, where to order the cake. I pushed back, stuck to my vision. The wedding turned out beautiful, but her presence loomed over everything. Still, I didn't argue. I figured what mattered most was love and mutual respect with Nathan. After the wedding, we moved into the apartment his parents had given us. It had actually been bought by his father years ago and was still in his name. It was a nice 2-bedroom place, recently renovated, very comfortable. But I never felt like it was truly ours. His parents still had keys. Margaret would walk in unannounced, claiming she just came by to drop off pies or water the plants. I tried to stay polite, but deep down, I wanted a space that was truly ours, somewhere we made the rules. Still, I held back from suggesting an alternative. After all, I had options: those 3 apartments. But imagine me saying, "Hey, Nathan, let's move into one of my places. I never showed them to you, but I've got a few apartments." That would raise 1,000 questions. And I wasn't sure how Nathan would react. What if he thought I'd been hiding something? What if he got upset? Not to mention Margaret, who'd surely go into overdrive the moment she sensed I had a way out of her reach. So, I waited. Then came that visit with the notary just 1 week after the wedding. My secret almost slipped out. But I managed to keep it hidden, thanks to staying quiet. Nathan took it in stride. He even said he didn't need a prenup. We love each other. I'm not planning on getting divorced, so why worry about splitting assets? He even joked, if Mom's so worried, maybe she should sign a prenup with Dad. We laughed it off and decided to live our lives, ignoring Margaret's odd behavior. But she didn't stop. She started showing up more often, nitpicking everything. Why are there dirty dishes in the sink? Where were you walking around till midnight? I tried to stay polite, but sometimes I couldn't hold back. Nathan felt the tension and did his best to smooth things over. But one day, something happened that really stood out. Nathan was at work. I was home, studying for a training program. I'd recently landed a job at a consulting firm, but it required extra certification. Margaret showed up unannounced, glanced around, and sat down in the kitchen, staring at me. "Victoria, you do realize you won't be able to live on just Nathan's salary, right?" "Why not?" I looked up from my laptop. "I work too. The pay's not amazing yet, but it'll grow with time." She shook her head. "But you're still studying, aren't you?" "Just some extra training. And who knows when you'll actually start making good money. Meanwhile, you have to run a household. Think about the future, about children, and everything else." "Well, I figured we'd manage," I said, trying to stay calm. "It's just the 2 of us for now. The money we have is enough. And if anything comes up, my parents are happy to help." "Your parents?" She raised an eyebrow, clearly caught off guard. "Well, maybe. But they're not exactly well off, are they?" I stayed quiet. My parents weren't exactly rich, especially compared to Nathan's father, who had a military rank, a solid pension, and some decent savings. But I didn't want to agree with Margaret out loud. That would only give her more reason to look down on me. "Margaret," I said, the name slipping out naturally. She always insisted I call her that. After all, I'm your second mom. "We'll figure things out when the time comes, okay? Please don't worry so much." "Oh, everything seems so simple to your generation," she sighed, pulling her cup of tea closer. "But you have to plan ahead. You can't just let life run its course. Take this apartment, for example." She motioned around. "Sure, it's in my husband's name. But sooner or later, it'll belong to Nathan. And in case of a divorce." "Why are you jumping straight to divorce?" I snapped, unable to hold it in. "We just got married. I'm not implying anything. Life is unpredictable. Anything can happen. Do you two have any finances? Property? Where would that come from? I shrugged. I'm only 23. I just started working. Right. But what if your grandmother left you something? I heard she had money. I felt a chill run through me. Left you something sounded like a bait, a test to get me to admit the truth. I closed my laptop and looked her straight in the eye. My grandmother left us warm memories and a few family keepsakes, some furniture and clothing. That's all, I said, quiet but firm. I see, she dragged out the words, like she didn't quite believe me. I was just wondering. People said your grandmother was quite the businesswoman. I figured she must have stashed something away. If she did, we know nothing about it, I lied with a straight face. She studied me carefully, like she was trying to catch the slightest tremor in my voice or doubt in my eyes. But I'd already learned how to answer these kinds of questions without flinching. Well, if you say so, she finally said, standing up. Tell Nathan I stopped by. Ask him to call me. Once she left, I let out a sigh of relief. Yet again, I was reminded that telling her about the apartments would be like handing her a loaded weapon, something she'd use to constantly intrude and control. A few more weeks passed, and life slowly fell into a routine. I went to work, nothing too complicated at first, just basic tasks at the consulting firm. I was still studying, trying to prove myself. Nathan worked at the university, giving lectures, writing research papers. We mostly saw each other in the evenings, tired, but happy. Everything was fine, except Margaret still showed up unexpectedly to check in. But Nathan stood his ground, telling her we'd handle things ourselves and that she needed to respect our boundaries. One evening over dinner, we decided to talk about the future. Nathan, what would you think about us renting our own place? I asked gently. But we're already living in our apartment. Why pay rent? He replied, surprised. Is this because of Mom? Not just that. I just want to feel independent. Like we have our own space, something that doesn't come with your father's name on the deed. I get that, Nathan said, twirling his fork in thought. But think about it, renting a decent place is, what, at least $2,500 to $3,500 a month. More if we want something renovated. That could drain us. Either that or we take a mortgage. But we don't have a down payment yet. What if I could find the money or the space? The words slipped out before I could stop them. You, he smiled. What, did you win the lottery? Or are you asking your parents? Well, I caught myself. I couldn't just blurt out the truth, I might ruin everything. Just a thought. But if we had the means, would you want to move? Yeah, I think I would. I get that this setup doesn't feel right for you, always being watched. But for now, it's just wishful thinking. We're not rich yet. I nodded and said nothing. I thought, what if I just told him about the inheritance? Showed him one of the apartments, said I'd gotten it recently. Maybe it's time to be honest. But then I remembered how much he admired his mother. Her constant questions, her unannounced visits, her need to control everything. No. Not yet. In any good family drama, timing is everything and a little mystery never hurts. That's when another character entered the picture, my cousin, Elizabeth. She was 27, already divorced, lived on her own, and worked for a big interior design firm. One day, she called and said, "Hey, Victoria. I'm going to be near your place for a project. Mind if I stop by for tea?" Of course. Come by, I said, glad for the company. I needed to talk to someone. I hadn't told Elizabeth about the apartments either, but at least she wasn't obsessed with me like Margaret. She came over that evening. We had tea in the kitchen, and she looked around our small but cozy home, asking how things were going after the wedding. I gave her vague answers at first, but then I couldn't hold it in. "Let me ask you something," I said. Do you think a wife should always tell her husband if she owns something personal? Elizabeth snorted. Depends on what it is. If it's a childhood teddy bear, no. But if we're talking real estate or a lot of money, then yeah. In a marriage, honesty matters. Otherwise, there'll be drama. What if I'm scared he'll tell his mom? She laughed. Oh, that's what this is about. The infamous mother-in-law. Yeah, I get it. If you want to keep it from her but still be honest with your husband, that's tricky. Maybe you can tell Nathan you have some property but ask him to keep it private. You think that would work? Depends. Is he more loyal to you or his mom? That's what you have to figure out. So, do you actually have something? Just a small thing, I dodged. A mortgage on a garage, I added randomly, so I wouldn't look too suspicious. Elizabeth shook her head but didn't push. After she left, I kept thinking about what she'd said. Telling Nathan would mean asking him to keep something from his mother, something serious. And knowing Margaret, that would put him in an impossible position. Wife wants secrecy, mom demands the truth. He'd be stuck in the middle. No, better to wait. All this tension around the inheritance was starting to affect our relationship. Nathan was distant, quiet, coming home with a cloud over his head. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. Nathan, what's going on with you? It feels like you're hiding something from me. There is something, he said, and my blood ran cold. For a second, I thought he already knew about the apartments. It's Mom. She keeps pressuring me to convince you to sign a prenup. She calls every day, saying it's for the best. But I'm tired of explaining to her that we don't need it. Why won't she let it go? I said, relieved it wasn't about the secret. Just tell her we're not planning on getting divorced. I try. But she thinks since you don't come from money, you have nothing to lose, and if we split up, you'll try to take everything. That's insane, I snapped. I don't want anything. I know. But she thinks it's about protecting me, and our family. Maybe I should just sign it. I offered, remembering the clause about declaring assets now. No, Nathan said, shaking his head. I don't want that. It doesn't sit right with me. But what if it would at least calm her down? It won't. She'll just find something else to obsess over. We hugged. I could feel how torn he was. He loved me, but he didn't want to fight with his mom. And I was caught in my own storm. Should I hide the inheritance or not? Maybe I should just sign the prenup and write down that I have no property. That might get Margaret off my back. But part of me resisted. What if the truth came out later? Would they accuse me of lying? I honestly didn't know what to do. A couple of months had passed since the wedding. Margaret, clearly tired of pushing us directly, decided to change tactics. She started stirring the pot within the family, dragging Nathan's father and a handful of relatives into the mix. Suddenly, there were all these family dinners with aunts and cousins, all dropping subtle hints about how young couples should focus on the greater good, not just their personal desires. At one of these dinners, I felt like I was under a spotlight, every glance slicing right through me. Nathan's aunt, Irene, sat across the table, asking strange questions. Victoria, you studied economics, right? Our whole family's full of engineers, and then there's you, a humanities person. Yes, I majored in economics, I nodded, knowing full well it wasn't technically humanities, but I didn't feel like correcting her. So you're good with money? That degree won't go to waste, huh? There was something mocking in her tone. I hope not. Have you ever thought about using your knowledge to boost the family's income? Like, say, investing in real estate? I almost choked on my salad when she said real estate. Has Margaret already been whispering her suspicions to Aunt Irene? I thought. Trying to stay calm, I answered, well, I don't exactly have that kind of capital lying around to jump into real estate. And we just got married, so we're a bit tight on cash. Aunt Irene replied slyly. But maybe your grandmother left something behind? I heard she was quite resourceful. Maybe, Margaret chimed in, but Victoria claims she didn't inherit anything. I pretended not to notice the bite in her voice and smiled as politely as I could. Oh, if only. I'd invest in the stock market or maybe buy a little apartment to rent out. But for now, that's just a dream. Nathan sat beside me, growing more and more tense by the minute. It was obvious he hated how his family was cornering me like this. Finally, he'd had enough. Can we please change the subject? These constant comments about money and grandma's will are getting old. Victoria's my wife. If she doesn't have anything, stop pestering her. And if she does, I'm sure I'd already know. Enough. The room fell into awkward silence. Margaret looked offended. The rest of the relatives started whispering. I felt like the odd one out again. But deep down, I was proud. Nathan had stood up for me. Still, one small victory wasn't enough to win the war. Margaret wasn't done. This time, she launched a whole scheme. One of the apartments I'd inherited from my grandmother was in a high-end part of town. The other two were more modest. But that special one grandma had snagged it at a bargain, then paid for a full luxury renovation. I'd been renting it out carefully, always through legal agreements, picking reliable tenants. Then one day, the tenant told me she was moving out, her circumstances had changed, and she couldn't afford the high rent anymore. I needed to find someone new. Quietly, I reached out to the realtor my grandmother used to work with. He got to work looking for a good match. And then, pure coincidence or a setup, I still don't know, Margaret and my father-in-law suddenly started talking about finding a bigger place. They said they had some savings and were exploring options to upgrade. I kept my mouth shut, pretending I had nothing to contribute. Then Nathan said, "Hey Mom, there are some great new places near Madison Avenue. I saw some listings might be worth checking out." Madison Avenue? That's an expensive area. Margaret gasped. Yeah, but it's a good investment. If you're thinking of upgrading. I froze. That's exactly where my luxury apartment is. Please don't let them come across my rental listing, I thought, praying my name wouldn't appear anywhere public. But I was too naive. I hadn't considered that the realtor might unknowingly send info to someone who knew me. And that's exactly what happened. He sent a photo of the apartment's gorgeous living room with its big window and park view to a potential renter, who apparently shared it with Margaret. She recognized the furniture. Worse, the address. She vaguely remembered that Grandma used to live on Madison Avenue. That was enough to spark suspicion. Still unsure, Margaret asked that friend to schedule a viewing and take her along. They went. The realtor greeted them, led them into the apartment. Margaret immediately recognized the interior, familiar decor, family photos I hadn't yet taken down. She walked through the rooms, soaking in every clue. When they left, she asked the realtor directly. "Who owns this apartment?" "I represent the owner," he said carefully. "We're renting it out legally." But Margaret was relentless. Maybe she offered him a little bonus, or maybe she just wore him down, but eventually, he slipped. He told her it belonged to a young woman named Victoria, inherited from her grandmother. That was all Margaret needed. The realtor called me afterward to give me a heads up. "Victoria, a woman came by today asking questions. I didn't give away too much, but she figured out it's your apartment. You might want to be ready for some follow-up." I felt the floor drop out from under me. So that's it. She knows. And she won't stop at just one. That evening, when Nathan got home, I was sitting in the kitchen, anxious and uneasy. I knew I had to tell him. It was better coming from me than from his mother. She'd twist it any way she wanted. "Nathan, there's something I need to tell you," I began. "I've been putting it off, but I think it's time. I own an apartment. Actually, 3. I inherited them from my grandmother. He froze, his hand still on his coffee mug. 3, he repeated, like he wasn't sure if I was joking. Yeah. 3. My grandmother was into real estate. When she passed, everything came to me. I didn't say anything because I was afraid your mom would turn it into a problem. Wow, he said, sitting there in silence. How long have you known? Since she died. It's been about a year. Everything's legal. I rent them out and earn income. Why didn't you tell me before? Tears welled up in my eyes. I didn't want to hurt you. I thought you'd understand, but I was scared of how your mom would react. You know how she is. I didn't want her trying to interfere, or demanding I hand anything over, or pushing us to make it part of the family's assets. I just didn't want our relationship to be about money. Nathan stared at me for a moment, then stood up and pulled me into a tight hug. You're such a fool, Victoria, he said with a relieved smile. But you're my fool. Yeah, I wish you told me sooner. But I get it. You're right about my mom. And I'm guessing she's already figured it out, which is why you're telling me now. I nodded and told him the whole story with the realtor. I see, Nathan sighed. All right. Consider it forgiven. But no more secrets, okay? I promise, I said, wiping my tears. So what do you plan to do with the apartments? Keep renting them out. We can always use the extra income. Or maybe sell one and finally buy something for ourselves. We'll talk about it. Ugh, Nathan sat back down, rubbing his temples. What about my mom? She's going to throw a fit. Probably. But we'll handle it. He smiled. Yeah. Together, we can handle anything. In that moment, I realized I loved him even more than before. Maybe hiding the inheritance had been a mistake, but at least now we were united against outside pressure. Our bond had grown stronger, if only for that evening. But Margaret wouldn't be Margaret if she gave up that easily. The very next day, she called Nathan and demanded that we come over to their house. She said she had something important to discuss. We already knew that important meant a lecture and most likely more blame thrown my way. Still, we decided to go, just to finally put everything out in the open. When we arrived, Margaret was sitting in the living room with Nathan's dad and, of course, Aunt Irene. Clearly, this was meant to be a family tribunal. We greeted everyone, and I tried to act confident even though I was shaking inside. Margaret gave me a cold stare and opened with, Victoria, we found out that you own 3 apartments, she said, like an inquisitor unveiling a crime. And you've been hiding this from us. Yes, I do, I replied calmly. So what? It's an inheritance, personal property I received before the marriage. But why did you lie? Aunt Irene jumped in. We asked several times, and you said you had nothing. I didn't lie. I just didn't think I was obligated to tell you, I countered. It's personal business. I didn't owe anyone an explanation. Well, now it's out in the open, Nathan's dad said, trying to sound more diplomatic. Victoria, you have to understand, we're family. Things like this are better shared openly. When I saw how aggressively you were all poking into my and my parents' financial background, I decided silence was safer, I admitted. Yes, it was a mistake, but not a huge one. Not huge. Margaret snapped. Don't you see how this reflects on the whole family? Now people will think you've been deceiving us, or that we're gold diggers. Mom, Nathan stood up, what people? Who cares what anyone thinks? This is between me and Victoria. No one else. No, son, it's not just about you. When you got married, we all became one family. And I don't like that your wife hid 3 apartments. Who knows what else she might be hiding? Maybe she doesn't even plan on having children, maybe she's just using our family for gain. That was too much. Something inside me snapped. That's outrageous. I exclaimed. What a horrible thing to say. Mom, stop, Nathan raised his voice. That's enough. Yes, Victoria owns some property. That's great. Why can't we just be happy that someone in the family is financially secure? Why does it always have to turn into suspicion? Because she kept it a secret, Margaret insisted. That means she doesn't trust us. And if she doesn't trust us, who knows what else she might do behind our backs? Or maybe it's because we gave her plenty of reasons not to trust us, Nathan's father suddenly chimed in, making the whole room go silent. He looked straight at his wife. Margaret, you've been pushing from the start, dragging notaries into things, forcing prenups. No wonder she kept quiet. So now you're taking her side? Margaret snapped. I'm on the side of common sense, he said. Victoria's choice was questionable, sure, but I understand it. She probably assumed you'd try to dictate how she should use the apartments. And that's exactly what you were planning, wasn't it? Margaret didn't say anything. But her face said it all. Of course she had wanted control. Of course she had plans, maybe to sell, reinvest, or decide what was best for the family. But I, Victoria, wasn't giving her that power. Look, I said, trying to keep my voice calm, I'm not trying to hurt anyone. I love Nathan. The apartments were a gift from my grandmother, and what I do with them is my decision. Nathan and I will figure things out together. Maybe one day we'll use the money to buy a home or we can live in one of them, Nathan offered. Why not? We're a young couple. Exactly, I nodded. We can live there or rent them out. We'll decide together. I'm ready to handle everything properly. But the apartments are mine. I'm not giving them up. I'm sorry, but that's final. But if you use your inheritance to buy a new home, that home becomes marital property, Margaret interjected, showing off her legal knowledge. Which means Nathan has a right to it. So what? I shrugged. He's my husband. Of course I'd share with him. But what I care about most right now is that no one interferes or tells us what to do. Aunt Irene shook her head. Young people these days are all about independence. And that's exactly what we admire, Nathan's dad nodded. A heavy silence followed. Then Margaret exhaled slowly, like she was finally surrendering. Fine. I won't argue anymore. But understand this, in our family, we've always talked things through. I just don't want your secret properties to come between you two later on. We'll deal with it, Nathan replied. Thanks for your concern. And just like that, the conversation ended. We left shortly after. I caught Margaret watching me with a look of lingering disapproval, but it was clear, I wouldn't be bending to her rules. And she would just have to live with that. She wasn't going to stop trying to control us, but I was done playing her game. Life moved on. My career at the consulting firm started to pick up. I got assigned more interesting projects, and my salary was decent. Nathan earned a steady income at the university and took on private tutoring gigs now and then. We were doing well financially. And now that the secret was out, we finally had the freedom to move into one of my apartments and live on our own, no more sharing space with his parents. We chose the most practical one, not the fancy one in the elite district, but the moderately sized, comfortable one that wouldn't draw comments like, "Oh, look at them living like royalty." We did a bit of light remodeling, spent a couple of months bouncing between his parents and mine, and finally moved in. For me, it felt like a true celebration. Finally, I could be the actual lady of the house, no more dreading the sound of a key in the door that wasn't mine. Nathan was thrilled too. Though I could tell deep down he still wondered, why didn't you just tell me? I tried to explain. Because of his mom. He understood. But a part of him still held on to that little sting of hurt. Margaret, on the other hand, was clearly not happy. She called a few times, asking, "So, when can I come see your new place? I'm curious, you know." I kept dodging her. Oh, the renovation isn't finished. We're too busy. Nathan's working late. But eventually, Nathan said we should just invite her over and be done with it. He believed hiding would only make things worse. We needed to aim for at least a polite peace. So the day came. Margaret arrived, looked around, and as expected opened with criticism. Well, this place is spacious, Victoria. But isn't it a bit flashy? That furniture looks expensive. It was already here. My grandmother lived here before. She had good taste, I replied, sticking to the truth. And I bet the utility bills are sky high. Are you too sure you can manage? We're managing just fine, Mom, Nathan stepped in. We both work. And have you thought, Victoria, if you have children someday, will this layout work? Maybe it needs to be redesigned. Redesigned? That was news to me. I saw Nathan roll his eyes. He hated it when his mother micromanaged. I kept my tone even. The layout is fine. If we want to, we can turn the other room into a nursery. It's too soon to worry about that. I see. So you're not planning for children yet? I realized this was her next pressure tactic. For Margaret, kids meant more control, telling us how to raise them, what to do. But Nathan and I had already decided we weren't in a rush. We'll decide when the time is right, Nathan said firmly. Let's just have some tea. Margaret pursed her lips but held back. All right, tea it is. I actually came with good intentions. Thought I'd bring you some things for the house, a tablecloth, maybe some curtains, but I figured you've already bought everything. Nathan smiled. Thanks, Mom. We've got it covered. Apparently, she picked up on the subtle message that her offer of gifts, and with them her quiet presence in our home, had been gently declined. Half an hour later, Margaret gathered her things and left, unable to find a single crack in our new life to wedge herself into. I breathed a quiet sigh of relief. Time went on. Things between Nathan and me were good. He'd tease me sometimes. So, millionaire, how much did you rake in from rent today, and laugh. I'd smile and shoot back, better question, how many academic papers did you publish? Those little jokes showed how well we'd come to understand each other. But the peace didn't last long. As it turned out, Margaret had another plan up her sleeve, this time, to rope me into their family business. After retiring from the military, Nathan's father had started a small transportation company. They owned a few trucks and handled deliveries. Margaret helped with the books and wanted to grow the business. And for that, they needed investment. And where better to get money than from Victoria? After all, she had 3 apartments and rental income. Why let that go to waste? We're all family, they must have thought. One day, Nathan's dad stopped by and said, Victoria, hear me out, we've got a great idea. We want to invest in a new truck, hire some more drivers, grow the business. It'll bring in good profit. You'd get a share of the earnings. That sounds interesting, I replied politely, not wanting to offend him, but I'm not ready to invest in the transport business. I don't know the field, and I'm not comfortable risking my savings without guarantees. But it's a family business, he said, raising an eyebrow. And I'm giving you my word. We're reliable people. I don't doubt that, I said carefully. But business can be unpredictable. We're just now settling into our own place, and we need funds for future expenses. For now, I'd rather not invest big sums. Unlike Margaret, my father-in-law was more reasonable. He simply nodded and said, I understand. But if you change your mind, you know where to find us. But the very next day, Margaret called. Victoria, what was that conversation with my husband? You refused to invest. Yes, I confirmed. I'm not ready to invest in something like that. But we're family. Is that how you treat your own? I'm not obligated to fund every project someone suggests just because we're related. Of course not. But families help each other. I'll help if someone's seriously ill or in a real emergency. But putting money into a business that might fail? That's not charity, it's risk. You don't trust us? Her tone sharpened. I don't trust unverified investments. I'm sorry, but it's my decision. She hung up. And I knew what that meant, another storm was coming. And I was right. Margaret started spreading the word that I was greedy, unwilling to support the family, hoarding my money for myself. I began hearing it from people I barely knew. Why won't you help your husband's family? I just wave it off. I don't owe anyone an explanation for my financial decisions. Nathan stood by me. He said it was my right. But even he couldn't stop his mother from talking. We started seeing her less and less. At family gatherings, she would pretend I wasn't even there, speaking to Nathan through me, as if I were invisible. He hated it, but tried not to stir things up. I didn't want to escalate either. But deep down, I knew things would probably stay like this. Margaret had lost her chance to control my money and my property, so now she'd just sulk and gossip. Life, however, has a way of putting things in perspective. The transportation business hit a rough patch, competition increased, and some legal issues cropped up. They had to dip into their savings and ended up with almost nothing. Margaret was furious, angry that I could have helped, but didn't. Still, the truth was clear: if I had invested, we would have lost that money too. My doubts had been justified. Meanwhile, Nathan and I were building our life. We fixed up our apartment, started talking about the future. A year later, we decided we were ready for a child. I got pregnant, and we had a beautiful baby boy. We named him Paul. Of course, Margaret was thrilled to have a grandson. She rushed to the hospital with flowers, all smiles, pretending all past grudges were forgotten. But the moment I got home and started raising Paul my way, the old patterns returned. Suddenly everything I did was wrong: how I fed him, how I dressed him, when I took him outside. And then the hints began again. Maybe you could let us stay in one of your apartments while we're struggling. We could rent it out, rebuild the business, and pay you back later. Mom, stop, Nathan cut in. We're not discussing this. That was the moment my grandmother's advice finally came into full clarity. Don't tell anyone about the apartments, no one but your husband. And only once you're sure of where he stands. If his family starts pressuring you, stay silent as long as you can. In the end, I didn't stay silent forever, but I held the line long enough to keep control over what was mine. And because of that, I held on to control over my life. I guess you could say that's where our story ends. But in family dramas, nothing really ends forever. Still, here's the point: I got married, didn't mention the inheritance. A week later, my mother-in-law showed up with a notary, trying to lock me into a contract. I said nothing, and that silence protected my property. Later, when the truth came out, Nathan stood by me. We went through fights, tension, and plenty of drama, but our love held firm. And my status as the daughter-in-law with 3 apartments? That stayed mine and mine alone. Today, we're just living our life. Raising our son. I'm still working in consulting, Nathan's still at the university. Margaret still tries to interfere now and then, but Nathan and I handle things as a team. We don't let her cross boundaries, but we do our best to show respect for her role as Nathan's mother and Paul's grandmother. Looking back, I don't regret hiding the truth. Maybe I should have told Nathan sooner. But at the time, I saw how hard it was for him to stand up to his mother, and I truly believe our relationship might not have survived that early storm. We needed time to become stronger, more grounded in who we were as a couple. And we got there. No notary, no manipulation, no amount of pressure from Margaret could break what we built together. In that, we were stronger than she ever expected. And now, when I think back to that day, the doorbell ringing, and Margaret standing there with a notary, I smile. Good thing I kept quiet, I sometimes say to myself. And I know, deep down, that my gut was right. Yes, honesty is important in marriage. But when you're dealing with a family that can be overbearing and manipulative, sometimes silence at least at first can protect everything you've built. Now Nathan and I have no secrets between us, and that's what matters. As for Margaret, she has her own path. Maybe one day she'll accept my choices. And if not, well, we've learned how to live without her approval. So this is a story about boundaries, about how sometimes those boundaries take the shape of 3 apartments left behind by a wise grandmother. And how silence, when used wisely, can save a family from disaster. It might sound like a paradox, but it's the truth of my life. And if there's a lesson here, it's this: don't rush to show all your cards, wait until you're sure the person beside you values you, not what you own. And that their family won't try to use your trust against you. Of course, our journey isn't over. We're raising a son, thinking about having another child, continuing our careers. Margaret will no doubt keep trying to push her way back in because family drama never truly ends. But we've been through enough to know how to handle it. And if anyone ever shows up at our door with a notary again this time, I'll be ready. With paperwork, boundaries, and all the confidence I need to protect what's mine. Because life has taught me one thing: everything emotional and material should be protected, both legally and personally. That's how you make sure no surprise relatives with papers can ever shake your peace again. I look at my little son, peacefully sleeping in his crib, and think, may he grow up surrounded by love, free from any sort of family manipulation. Nathan and I will do everything we can to make sure he feels happy and secure. And as for my apartments, maybe one day, when he's grown, one of them will give him a head start in life. That'll be my gift to his future. But that's another story. So that's how it all turned out. The beginning of our marriage was loud and messy, like something straight out of a family drama. Accusations, notaries, family interventions. Arguments about money and inheritance. But we made it through, and the moral of this long story is simple: love each other, trust each other, but never let even your closest relatives cross your personal boundaries. And if you have an inheritance, be prepared someone will come for it. Still, if you've got someone by your side who truly loves you and stands with you, even the most persistent notary won't scare you. That's my story. No magic, no miracles, just real life, raw emotions, drama, and in the end, strong love. And so I wrap up this tale about how sometimes, keeping quiet can be your greatest protection. I look at my now 2-year-old son and can't help but smile at how curious and clever he's becoming. When Paul was still tiny, lying in that crib, I thought the hardest part was behind us. We had defended our independence. We'd carved out our own space, dealt with the inheritance, and created a stable family life. But life, as always, had new twists in store. And our family saga kept unfolding, still no magic but plenty of emotional ups and downs. At first, things were relatively calm. We were enjoying parenthood. Nathan was enthusiastically buying toys and books, and I was juggling work and household chores. My parents, who lived in another part of the city, helped with Paul when I asked. They were respectful and didn't intrude on our life. Only Margaret continued to drop by unannounced. Spotting a pile of laundry or scattered toys, she'd launch into a new round of judgment. Victoria, really? A child could trip over these cars. And when's the last time you mopped the floor? She'd scowl, scanning the living room cluttered with Paul's things. We're fine, Mom, Nathan would say, trying to distract her from my housekeeping crimes. Paul likes it here, it's his space. And anyway, we just got back from a walk. Didn't have time to clean up yet. Honestly, compared to the time she showed up with a notary or demanded money for a business, these little complaints barely registered. We were used to them. We'd think to ourselves, whatever, at least she's not poking around in our finances. But it soon became clear her ideas about money, business, and inheritance hadn't disappeared. She'd just hit pause. And now, she was gearing up for the next round, this time with a new angle. Nathan and I had been toying with the idea of selling one of my remaining apartments and buying a house closer to nature. It would be great for Paul to have space to play outdoors, not just around the apartment block. And I had to admit I dreamed of a big yard with flowers and a patio for family dinners. Nathan liked the idea, but hesitated. Moving to the suburbs would mean sacrificing convenience, longer commutes, more driving for school runs. We're not talking about some remote village, I argued. There are suburbs with good infrastructure, schools, shops, buses. And peace and fresh air. In the end, we decided to hold off. Instead, we focused on upgrading our current place to make it more comfortable for Paul. We turned one room into a proper kids' room, bright wallpaper, toys, bookshelves. Everything felt like it was falling into place. Then Margaret showed up again. This time, she didn't come alone. With her was a woman I'd never seen before, maybe in her 40s. "Victoria, this is Gabrielle Peterson, a longtime family friend," Margaret introduced her guest, not bothering to explain what exactly made her a family friend. "She's a realtor, works in real estate. We thought you might need her help." I frowned slightly as I took their coats. Why would I need a realtor all of a sudden? "Well, you do own 3 apartments," Margaret said with an overly sweet voice that dripped with fake concern. "Maybe Gabrielle can help you manage those assets." Then she raised her voice slightly, as if making some grand announcement. "Maybe you two could discuss selling one of them and investing in something promising." I tensed. This was sounding all too familiar, like their old pitch about the transport business. "Thanks, but I'll handle my properties myself," I said, still polite but feeling the irritation rise. "I already work with someone I trust." "Gabrielle's excellent," Margaret insisted. "And who knows, maybe you'll even want to expand by a 4th property." Now it was obvious. She'd brought Gabrielle to nudge me toward some scheme. Maybe another attempt to rope me into one of her investment ideas. "Margaret, let's do this. I'm always open to new people, but if I ever decide to buy or sell, I'll let you know. For now, we're not planning any deals," I said as calmly and politely as I could. Gabrielle gave a pleasant smile. "Of course. No pressure. If you ever need anything, Margaret has my number." They left about 10 minutes later. Margaret looked so bitter, you'd think I had just ruined a $1 million deal. I just smirked to myself, back at it again. I hadn't even had time to relax when Nathan came home and saw the look on my face. "Let me guess, your mom? With a realtor this time? Trying to get me to do some deal? I'm sure she's still hoping I'll invest in their business." "Unbelievable," Nathan rubbed his face wearily. "I'll talk to her. She needs to stop bringing strangers into our home." "Deal." He did talk to her. But Margaret's stubbornness was unshakable. She complained to her husband, to Aunt Irene, to every relative in earshot that I was closed off, unwilling to listen. I just shrugged, let them talk, as long as they stay out of my business. Then, unexpectedly, my sister Elizabeth stepped into the picture. She'd been living her own life and didn't usually get involved. But she'd heard about the latest stunts from Margaret and gave me a call. "Victoria, have you thought more about buying a house? I'm working on an architectural project right now. If you want to build something from scratch, maybe we can do it together." "I like the idea," I said, "but I'm afraid it'll set Margaret off again. She'll think I'm choosing to invest in a house instead of their business." "Oh, forget what she thinks," Elizabeth sighed. "It's your money, your inheritance, your life." The more I thought about it, the more I realized she was right. And slowly, the idea started taking root. Maybe it was time to stop worrying about what Margaret might say and start building the life we actually wanted. A house with a big living room, a fireplace, and a garden for Paul. But before we could make any decisions, a new wave of drama hit, this time, not about money, but parenting. Paul was growing into a lively, energetic little boy. When he turned 3, we enrolled him in a great nearby preschool. And right away, Margaret turned on her watchdog mode. Are you sure that place is good? I heard the teachers are strict. They don't even take the kids outside that much. Wouldn't it be better if he went to the preschool near us so I could pick him up? I calmly explained. Nathan looked into it, and the reviews are excellent. It's close to our place. Driving him across the city doesn't make sense. Why not? I could drive him. Nathan quickly shut that down. Mom, Victoria and I already made the decision. It's done. Thankfully, she didn't push that time. But soon she found a new angle. She started insisting Paul needed special developmental classes, maybe a tutor to start reading early. I tried to stay polite, saying we'd decide ourselves when Paul was ready to start learning letters. No need to force academic pressure on a 3-year-old. But Nathan was already stacking letter blocks at his age, she exclaimed. I thought to myself, so? Paul stacks blocks too. What's the problem? But she kept going. If only I could take charge of Paul's development. I've always had a knack for teaching. I smiled and said, I don't think you'd have the patience to turn him into a genius. This kind of chatter continued all summer while Paul adjusted to preschool. Every visit, Margaret found something new to criticize, something we were doing wrong, something Paul was missing out on. Thankfully, Nathan stayed calm and shut down most of her remarks, and I'd learned to let her complaints roll right off me. Then suddenly, my health took a hit. I had to step back from work and even ask my parents to help take care of Paul. It all happened so fast. I started feeling constantly exhausted, my lower back and stomach hurt. Doctors found some gynecological issues, and I had to undergo surgery. Thankfully, it wasn't anything critical, and within a month I was back on my feet. But that period really shook up our family life. First of all, Margaret suddenly tried to step into the role of primary caregiver. She showed up at our place and said, Victoria, you've got surgery coming up, you can't take care of the house or the baby. I'll move in and take control of everything. As soon as I heard move in, I froze. No way. I was grateful for the offer, but I knew perfectly well that given the chance, Margaret would start rearranging furniture and running the household her way. Nathan tensed up too. Mom, that's way too much. Victoria's parents already said they'd help out. And I'm going to take some time off, I'll be home while she recovers. If we need extra support, we'll call. Margaret got offended. Right. I see I'm not welcome anymore. Don't come crying to me when you need a pair of helping hands. I was worried Nathan might cave, but he didn't. He stood firm that his mother wouldn't be living with us. Besides, I was an adult, not helpless, and the surgery wasn't so serious that I'd be out of commission for months. In the end, I recovered in peace, spending a couple of weeks at my parents' place so I didn't have to worry about cooking or cleaning. Paul stayed with Nathan or came to visit me. My dad would bring him over. My mom handled all the chores, and I just rested. Want me to get you more vitamins? She asked one evening as I sat quietly in an armchair, reading. I've got everything the doctor prescribed, I smiled. I just need time and rest. Margaret clearly wasn't happy. Her heroic help wasn't needed. From a distance, she started complaining to Nathan over the phone. Oh, so your wife's mother is more important now? And I'm no one, I guess. Nathan kept trying to reason with her. Mom, come on. It's just more comfortable for Victoria over there. She doesn't have to adapt to someone else's place. It's her childhood home. Let's not turn this into a fight. Margaret begrudgingly dropped it, but clearly didn't let it go. Soon enough, she found a new way to express her discontent. By the time I came back home fully recovered, Margaret's family council had apparently made a new decision. Her husband, Aunt Irene, and some random relatives decided our son, Paul, needed to spend more time with extended family to be properly raised. Apparently, I was lacking in traditional values. They started talking about it openly. Let's take Paul to our country house on the weekends. He should get used to being around his extended family. Sure, the repairs aren't finished yet, but it's basically a summer home. He could bond with his uncles and aunts there. I stayed polite but firm. Thank you, but Paul's still too little to be away from us for long. He's not used to your house, and everything's new to him there. Besides, we enjoy spending weekends with him ourselves. Of course, Margaret didn't like that answer. This is just selfish parenting. It's good for kids to have a change of environment. And you don't mind him visiting your parents? Why block him from seeing his paternal grandmother? I had to remind her that there's a big difference between a couple of hours at grandma's and a full weekend away in an unfamiliar place. I wasn't even sure the house was safe. Last I'd heard, the roof needed work, and there were issues with the electricity. And with her husband still trying to fix his failing business, I doubted they had the means to make the place kid-friendly. But Margaret wouldn't budge. You're insulting our whole family. You don't think we're capable of taking care of a child. We want Paul to grow up trusting all his relatives. Nathan saw that I was about to lose my temper and stepped in. Mom, we're not against visits. But Paul's still more comfortable with us. Let's give it time. When he's older, maybe 5 or so, we can talk about weekends away. That ended the conversation for the time being. But I knew it wasn't over. I could see it in Margaret's eyes. She was already plotting her next move, still determined to prove she was the one who called the shots in this family. While all this drama was playing out, my sister Elizabeth was climbing the career ladder in interior design. One evening, she called, full of excitement. Victoria, you won't believe it, I'm working on a premium suburban development. They're going to start selling lots and houses soon. Pricey, but the area is amazing. You and Nathan ever think about investing in something like that? It got me thinking. We were happy with our apartment, but long-term, I'd always dreamed of having a house at least for weekends and holidays. I brought it up with Nathan. Let's check it out, see where it is and what the prices are, he said. If it looks promising, maybe we buy a lot and build later. We went to see it. It was about an hour outside the city, surrounded by forest, near a river, clean air, peaceful vibe. But yeah, not cheap. I figured if I sold one of my mid-range apartments, it would just about cover the lot. The only question was it worth it? Building a house isn't quick or cheap. Back home, we started weighing our options. You know, Nathan said, I really liked the place. But let's be honest, if we buy the lot, we'll still have to pay for utilities, designs, construction. We don't have enough saved to do it all at once. It might just sit there empty for years while we go barbecue on the weekends. Might be smart, might not. Then again, the value could go up. It's an investment. And if we change our minds, we can always sell it. After a lot of back and forth, we decided to go for it. I knew that once I put an apartment up for sale, Margaret would catch wind and try again to redirect my money into their business. I wasn't wrong. I discussed everything with my longtime realtor, the same one who had worked with my grandmother. The apartment was in demand, and we found buyers quickly. But during the paperwork process, Margaret somehow found out the apartment was up for sale. She showed up fuming. Victoria. What is this I hear? You're selling your apartment and didn't even consult us. Why would I? It's my property, I replied coolly. But we're family. And I have an idea. Invest the money in our trucking business. We've started rebuilding, bought a couple of used trucks, but we need one more, brand new. The profits will be yours. I sighed inwardly, so predictable. Sorry, Margaret, but Nathan and I already decided to buy a lot in a new housing development. That's more important for our family than another truck. Out of moves, she tried playing the guilt card with Nathan. Son, are you even thinking straight? That area doesn't even have a preschool or clinic. Maybe talk some sense into your wife. Mom, this is our decision, Nathan said, trying to stay calm. We've thought it through. One day we'll build a house, it's a long-term project for us. You'd be better off putting that money toward Paul's education abroad, she shot back. That house will just end up half-built and abandoned. I realized then there was no point trying to reason with her. Sure, we didn't know yet how we'd fund the construction, but just knowing we'd have a piece of land and the option to live outside the city gave us peace of mind. I stood firm. We've made our decision. The sale is nearly finalized. The money will go straight into the land. Margaret went quiet. Then muttered, "You'll regret this," and slammed the door on her way out. We sold the apartment and bought the lot. Now we just needed to figure out when to start building. We weren't in a rush. We wanted Elizabeth's help with the design, time to save up, and to avoid living in the middle of a half-dug foundation. Everything was going pretty smoothly until Margaret hit us with an unexpected move. She decided to drag my parents into the drama. One day, I got a call from my mom. "Victoria, Margaret just called. She asked us to talk some sense into you. Said you're about to make a huge mistake with your inheritance." "And what did you say?" I asked, already clenching my fists. "I told her you're smart and can make your own decisions." But she wasn't happy. She said that if the money's going toward land, then clearly you don't care about helping their family. I almost laughed. What, Nathan and Paul don't count as part of her family, if we're talking about building a future home? But I wasn't laughing for long. It was clear Margaret was now trying to recruit allies, even pressuring my side of the family. "Mom, don't worry, I've got everything under control. Margaret's just stressed because of their business problems. She wanted me to give her the money for trucks. But you know, it's my money. My life. Of course, sweetheart, don't worry. We're with you." That helped me calm down a bit, but inside, a quiet fury was building. I really wanted to shut Margaret down once and for all so she'd never try to pull this again. Still, I kept myself in check. I knew an open confrontation wouldn't bring us peace. The next day, Nathan suggested, "How about we invite both our parents to dinner? A nice restaurant. Try to smooth things over. Show everyone we're all about respect and maybe end these silly power plays." "You really think it'll work?" I asked, skeptical. "I don't know. But maybe it'll take the edge off. They'll still be seeing each other at birthdays and holidays." We booked a table at a quiet restaurant and invited both couples. My parents arrived first and took their seats. Then came Margaret and my father-in-law. She walked in like a queen ready to declare war. To his credit, her husband smiled and greeted everyone kindly. The conversation started with the usual health, the weather, Paul's progress at preschool. Then it shifted to work. Who was doing what these days? I hoped we could tiptoe around the money and real estate stuff. But of course, Margaret raised her glass of wine, squinted, and said, "Well then, let's drink to the day when everyone in this family finally learns to trust each other and stops hiding profitable deals and future plans." Nathan and I exchanged looks. My parents stayed politely silent, clearly not wanting to get dragged into drama. I turned to Margaret and said as calmly as I could, "Margaret, I hope you're not implying that anyone here is hiding things on purpose. We've already cleared everything up." "Well, you never ask for advice," she said, shaking her head. "Do we need to consult people on every decision?" Nathan stepped in. "You and Dad run your business however you like. You don't check with us first." His father nodded. "Nathan's right. We make our own choices, and so should you too. Margaret, let's admit they're grown-ups now." Margaret sighed heavily, took a sip of wine, and then turned to my mom. "Catherine, what do you think? Is it normal for a family to make big decisions without consulting anyone?" My mom smiled. "I think people ask for advice when they trust someone and want to hear their opinion. But demanding that someone consult you, that's too much. The kids will figure it out on their own." It was obvious Margaret didn't like that answer, especially because it supported my side. But she held it together and said, "Fine, let's not ruin the evening. Hopefully, we'll learn to work as a team someday. I breathed a silent sigh of relief, thinking maybe the storm was calming. We carried on with dinner, laughed about funny stories from the past, and talked about Paul. Things seemed more relaxed. But as we were saying goodbye, Margaret came up to me and whispered, "You think I'm just going to back off?" "No. My family is my family, and you don't get to ignore our problems. We'll talk again." A chill ran down my spine, but before I could respond, she was already heading to the coat check. Nathan shot me a questioning look, like, what did she say? I just shrugged, same old song. We headed home. I was seething inside but didn't want to show it in front of Nathan and escalate things. He noticed I was tense and said, "I can tell my mom did something again. I'm sorry. She just can't accept that you're independent. But these are our choices. We have every right." I know. I try not to react anymore, but honestly, I'm exhausted. Feels like she'll never stop. That night, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing. This wasn't over. Margaret still had one tool left, using Paul as leverage and trying to control how we planned his future. I had a strong feeling another round of manipulation was coming. And I was right. A few months later, after we finalized the land purchase and I started scouting architects besides Elizabeth, who had offered to help with plans, I got a call from Paul's preschool director. "Hi Victoria. I wanted to touch base. Your son's grandmother stopped by recently. She asked us to give Paul extra attention. I just wanted to clarify how we should respond to that." I froze. "Which grandmother?" I believe it was Margaret. She said she wants to attend his classes, monitor his development, and bring in educational materials. I nearly laughed at how ridiculous it sounded, but inside, I was fuming. Now she was interfering at school. I see. Let's be clear, we don't mind if Paul's grandmother attends open events or celebrations, if that's allowed. But we don't want any special treatment for him. He should be treated just like the other kids. The director agreed and apologized for the inconvenience. I immediately called Nathan. "Did your mom seriously go to Paul's preschool and start making demands?" "What?" Nathan was furious. "I had no idea. I'm calling her right now." Later, he told me Margaret had tried to set up private lessons for Paul and even wanted to sit in on them herself. The director had refused, explaining it went against school policy. Margaret then insisted they focus more on reading with Paul and handed over books she brought from home. Nathan had a talk with her and told her to stop doing things behind our backs. Her reaction was exactly what we expected. "I was only trying to do what's best for my grandson. You're bad parents if you don't support his advanced learning." We just looked at each other. "What advanced learning? He's 3.5. He's doing just fine." Amidst all this, Nathan and I started to really cherish the moments when it was just the three of us: weekends at the zoo, walks in the park, or little trips to our plot of land, where we'd only just marked the boundaries and built a small shed for tools. Paul would run through the grass, laughing, and we'd feel this overwhelming sense of freedom. Out there, we were far from the city noise, from Margaret's calls, her criticism, her advice. One afternoon, sitting on folding chairs next to our still empty plot, I said to Nathan, "Hey, what if we put up a tiny summer cabin here? Just something simple and wooden, so we can stay overnight. And then, when we save up more, we start building for real." Nathan lit up. "That's an awesome idea. It'll be our little oasis. Honestly, I'm already thinking if I can work remotely, we could spend the whole summer out here." Right away, I pictured it all in my head. We're living in a simple little house, Paul running around the yard in the morning, kicking a ball, a few small garden beds with herbs, us grilling in the evening, and at sunset, just listening to the birds. It felt like the perfect escape from endless family drama. But we both knew if Margaret ever found out about this plan, she'd try to insert herself into it somehow. And technically, nothing stopping her from buying a plot of land next door and moving right in. What then? Would we end up living under constant surveillance? Let's just hope she doesn't decide to follow us there, Nathan said, reading my mind. Ugh, don't even joke, I muttered. But honestly, those plots are expensive for now, so she probably won't take the risk. Things aren't exactly great with their business. Nathan nodded and put his arm around me. We sat there watching Paul chase soap bubbles through the grass. I wanted to believe we'd be okay. But being part of a family soap opera means surprises never stop. And sure enough, one hit us just when we least expected it. The heating system in our current home, the apartment we had bought and were living in, suddenly broke down. The pipes were ancient, never replaced even back when my grandmother lived there. We hadn't done a major renovation either, kept pushing it off as something for later. And now, in the middle of winter, the pipes started leaking. One of the mains even burst. We called the plumbers, but it took them a few days to fix everything. The apartment got damp, Paul started coughing, and Nathan was fuming because the repairs were going to cost a fortune. That's when Margaret showed up. I told you, you need my help with this kind of stuff. This is a full-scale overhaul, and you can't handle it on your own. I mentally smirked, of course. She'd love to manage the renovation too. We did have money set aside, thankfully I was still earning from renting out the other 2 apartments, and Nathan and I had savings for the house. But replacing the entire heating system was still a big expense. Thanks for your concern, Mom, Nathan said calmly. We've got the funds. We'll hire good specialists and make sure it's done right. Why don't you just come live with us while it's all going on? Margaret asked hopefully. The thought of moving in with Margaret and my father-in-law, for an indefinite period, made me shudder. I could already hear her, now I get to supervise everything. Honestly, I'd rather stay at my parents' place, at least there, I wouldn't get guilt-tripped every hour. Thanks for the offer, I said politely. But we've already planned to stay at my parents' while this is sorted. Of course. Always the wife's family, Margaret grumbled. Nathan, raising his voice slightly, said. Mom, enough. Catherine's apartment is spacious. You and Dad are already crammed in your 2-bedroom. You've got your own stuff to worry about, why make it harder for everyone? That ended the conversation, and we avoided a full-blown argument this time. While the repairs were underway, I stayed at my parents' with Paul. Nathan bounced back and forth checking in on the workers, sometimes crashing at our damp apartment. It was exhausting. But it also made me think even more seriously about building the new house. We need to speed up the country house project, I told Elizabeth. We need a backup home. When Elizabeth heard about our mess, she said. I'll sketch a great concept for you. If you can find a decent construction crew, you could break ground by fall. And the money? I muttered, already thinking of how much the apartment repairs had eaten up. I get it, she said. It's a lot. But start with the foundation. Later, you can work on the frame. Building takes years sometimes, but at least you'll be moving forward. I lit up. Told her we'd think it over. Nathan agreed, but warned me. Just remember, if we start building, it'll either mean taking out a loan or using up all our savings. Otherwise, it'll drag on forever. I still have rental income from one apartment, and I've got some tucked away. We might be able to pull it off without a loan, but we'll have to tighten our belts. We talked it through and decided to start small and see how it goes. The apartment renovation wrapped up in a couple of months. We moved back in. Then came another bombshell. Nathan's dad announced that their transport business had officially collapsed. His partners walked out, debts piled up. They'd had to sell off assets. Suddenly, Margaret and her husband had no money left to live on. His pension was a pittance, her job was unreliable and only part-time at that. One day, Nathan came home from meeting with them, sat down heavily and said, Victoria, it's bad. Mom's pushing Dad to sell their apartment and downsize, but even that won't cover their debts. That's really sad, I said quietly, genuinely feeling sorry. Though honestly, Margaret had pushed her husband into risky decisions without any safety net. She's hinting that we should help out, Nathan continued. Like, give them money to cover at least part of it. But I don't want to ask you. It's your family inheritance. I sighed deeply. Sure, I felt bad for them, but after everything Margaret had done to me, if I handed over a big sum now, I'd only feel used. Nathan, I'm willing to consider an interest-free loan or something if they sign a contract and agree to repay it. But just giving them the money? I'm sorry, no. I get it. I don't want to just hand it over either. But they're still my parents. I can't just say, figure it out on your own. I understand, I said, but I doubt your mom would agree to any formal agreement. She thinks just because I'm in the family, I owe her. We spent a long time discussing options. Nathan could take out a loan himself, but then everything, our lives, our home plans would be at risk. So we decided he'd talk to his dad, see if he was at least reasonable. The talk happened, and his dad agreed if we were going to help, he was ready to put their country house up as collateral. But when Margaret found out, she exploded. You're putting our dacha up as collateral? To her? That greedy, selfish woman who's just looking out for herself. Nathan tried to calm her. Mom, it's the only realistic way to make sure the loan gets paid back. Victoria's not refusing to help, she just wants a guarantee. That's normal. Guarantees? We're a family. How many times do I have to say it? Families help each other without strings. Of course, nothing good came out of that. Margaret threw a fit, said she'd rather die than take money from me, with conditions. But Nathan's dad, being more level-headed, understood the situation. Eventually, they must have decided to manage on their own. Nathan and I breathed a sigh of relief. We felt bad, sure, but we also couldn't keep being the family's ATM. And then came the twist we never saw coming. Nathan's dad called in the middle of the night. Margaret had been rushed to the hospital, severe hypertension, dangerously high blood pressure. We rushed there the next morning. She was admitted immediately, and the doctors said she needed urgent treatment for cardiovascular issues. When we arrived, she looked pale, tears in her eyes. Nathan was visibly worried, and I was scared too. For all our issues, I never wished her harm. How are you, Mom? Nathan asked gently, sitting by her side. Not good, son, she whispered. The doctors say I need surgery on my arteries. It's expensive. I don't know where we'll get the money. I really did feel sorry for her. But I also knew this was the classic family drama moment. The enemy is now vulnerable, and it's up to you to decide whether to help. I looked at Nathan. He gave me a silent look. What do we do? We'll figure something out, he said softly. Don't worry. What do the doctors say? They want to do a bypass surgery. It'll cost nearly $30,000. Plus rehab. She started crying again. We just don't have it. Your father isn't earning anything. $30,000 was no small sum, but not impossible. If I really wanted, I could dip into my savings. And now came the moment of truth. Was I ready to help the woman who, just weeks ago, had called me greedy, meddled in our lives, and criticized everything I did? Could I rise above all that for the sake of her health and her life? I looked at Nathan. Nathan, we'll help. Right? Of course, he said quickly, clearly relieved I wasn't saying no. Mom, don't cry. We'll cover the surgery. On whatever terms Victoria decides. My heart ached. But I knew this time, I wasn't going to ask for any repayment. That would just feel cruel. She was sick. I wasn't going to make her sign anything. There are no terms, I said quietly. We'll help. Health isn't something you turn into debt. Margaret looked at me through tears. Victoria. I don't know what to say. I've been so awful to you. And now, you want to help? Yes. I do, I said. Because you're Nathan's mom. You're Paul's grandmother. No matter how many arguments we've had, your life still matters to me. She broke down in tears, and it felt like everything was in them: pain, resentment, and regret. Nathan held her hand. I stood nearby, swallowing the lump in my throat. The doctors asked us to step out, saying she needed rest, and we promised we'd sort out the payment as soon as possible. On the way out of the hospital, Nathan said, "I'm sorry this keeps happening, like we're dipping into your inheritance again." It's not inheritance, it's my savings. But that doesn't matter. I'll transfer the money. Let her get the treatment she needs. Thank you, Victoria. I love you. He took my hand, and I felt this deep sense of relief. No matter everything that had happened, we weren't going to let her die just because she didn't have the money. Maybe, just maybe, this would finally soften her heart toward me. We paid for the surgery, and a week later, it was successfully done. Margaret was moved to a regular room. The doctors said she'd need rehabilitation at a health resort next. She looked better, even though still weak. When Nathan, Paul, and I came to visit her, she smiled. "Hi, my darlings. Sorry, Paul, Grandma couldn't see you sooner. I'll get better soon, and then you'll come visit me, okay?" "Okay," he beamed. He didn't really grasp how serious everything had been. I noticed something had shifted in Margaret. She was warmer toward me. I guess a health scare has a way of changing your perspective. She quietly called me over to her bed, asking Nathan to keep Paul busy. "Victoria, I need to say something. I'm really grateful for your help. And I want to apologize. My whole life, I believed that if someone in the family had money, they should share it and follow the family's rules. But you've always had your own mind. And I fought that." "I understand," I said, sitting down. "You did what you thought was best for your son. But I was wrong. I'm sorry for bringing a notary to your door during your first week of marriage, for pushing that prenup, for pressuring you to invest in our business," she said, her voice low with shame, "and for trying to manipulate things through your son. What matters is that it's all behind us now." I felt a warm wave rush through me. Focus on getting better. When you're out of here, let's try to build a more peaceful relationship. She nodded and tears welled up again. "You're a good person, Victoria. And I only realize it now. I was scared of you. I don't even know why. I thought you were after Nathan for his money, that you'd leave him and take half the apartment. But it was never like that. No, it wasn't. I just wanted us to live our own life, not by someone else's rules." We talked for a little while longer, and for the first time, I felt like we were equals. Maybe she really had come to understand how wrong she'd been. As we left, Nathan hugged me and said, "Looks like things are finally changing. Who would have thought it would take a health scare to get here?" "Life has a weird way of teaching us things," I said. The next couple of months, Margaret went through rehab. We paid for her stay at the sanatorium. I'd stopped counting the cost after years of fighting. I just wanted some peace. Even my father-in-law seemed a bit warmer toward me now. He probably saw that I didn't abandon his wife when things got tough. In the evenings, he'd call Nathan to give updates and thank us for everything. When Margaret came home, we threw a little celebration. Set the table, invited my parents, and Aunt Irene, who was also happy to see Margaret recovered. We gave her small gifts. And for the first time in years, she raised a toast and said, "Victoria, I want everyone here to know you're not just my daughter-in-law. You're truly part of this family. You didn't just help me get better. You helped me face my fears. Thank you for teaching me to respect someone else's boundaries." I sat there smiling, hearing the sincerity in her voice. I kept thinking, did we really just reach a truce? Maybe, after all those years of battle, we were finally heading toward peace. Of course, life's never completely perfect, there are always little things that pop up. Margaret still offered parenting advice now and then, sometimes a little too eagerly. But it wasn't aggressive or critical anymore, it came from a genuine desire to help. She stopped hinting that I owed them anything financially, and began to respect that I had my own path. More than that, she started appreciating my professional skills. "Victoria, you know about finance. Can you help your father and me figure out how to refinance our loan?" she asked one day calmly, without that usual controlling tone. I gave her a few suggestions and called a couple of economist friends. They were thankful, and things began to settle down. Meanwhile, my sister Elizabeth had finished designing the plans for our future house. We started looking for a construction crew. Margaret now asked with genuine curiosity, "What are you two planning? What kind of facade will it have? Are you putting in a fireplace? I can already picture you sipping tea by it in the winter." She spoke with real enthusiasm. "If you need help choosing materials, I know a good designer. We worked together during one of our old renovation projects." And I realized I'd actually welcome her suggestions, as long as they came kindly and not with the intention of taking control. Maybe relationships could change, if people just showed a bit more humanity. Nathan visited the land almost every week, keeping track of everything. On weekends, Paul and I would join him. We'd set up a small wooden cabin with a few beds, a table, and chairs enough to stay for a couple of nights. Paul loved it. For him, it already felt like a real countryside home, still temporary, but definitely ours. One day, as I was chopping firewood near the cabin needed to heat the little stove, Nathan walked up to me and said, "You know, I don't say this enough, but I'm so proud of who you are. You stand your ground, you don't let anyone push you around, but you're still kind even to people who've hurt you. Thank you." I smiled, brushing my hair back from my face. "And you've done a lot too. You could have sided with your mom, pressured me into giving up my savings for the family business, but you always stood with me." "Because I love you," Nathan said simply. We hugged under the wide blue sky, feeling like all of it, carving out our independence, defending our boundaries, even clashing with relatives was worth it for moments like this. In the end, we found our way to understanding. Even if it wasn't instant. And now I often think back to that day when I was younger and far more naive, standing at the threshold of my new married life, hearing the doorbell ring, and finding my mother-in-law on the doorstep with a notary. It's been 4 years since then, but it feels like a lifetime. I still tell myself, thank God I kept quiet back then. Because if I had told her about the 3 apartments from the start, she would have done everything in her power to take control of my inheritance and my freedom. Who knows? Maybe Nathan and I would have clashed even harder and wouldn't have survived that kind of pressure so early in our marriage. On the other hand, I've come to realize sooner or later, the truth comes out. What really matters is having the person you love stand by your side when it does. All of my mother-in-law's attempts to reform me were doomed from the start. In the end, it was her health scare that opened her eyes. She saw who was really there for her, who was willing to help, and maybe that's what finally changed her attitude toward me. Some might say the whole thing sounds like a fairy tale ending. But the truth is, life is messier than any novel. There are still new chapters ahead, finishing the house, raising Paul, maybe even having a second child. Margaret, though she's calmed down a lot, is still not an easy person. Every now and then, she'll have a flare of jealousy or try to control something. But now, I know how to handle it. I calmly say, this is our family. We're happy to hear your advice, but the decision is ours. The most surprising part is that, after her surgery, she started talking to me like a friend. Maybe she finally realized life is too short to waste on fights and power games. One day, she even told me, "You know, Victoria, when I was young, I had a terrible relationship with my own mother-in-law. She always criticized me for not earning enough, for being bad at housekeeping. And I guess I absorbed that pattern. I thought it was normal to tell the younger generation what to do. It happens a lot, I sighed. People tend to repeat what they grew up with even when it hurt them. We were sitting in the kitchen, having tea. Nathan and Paul were in the other room, building something out of blocks. And for the first time, I didn't see Margaret as some all-powerful critic. I saw a woman who had faced her own fears and insecurities. "It's a shame it took me this long to realize," she said, looking out the window. "But thank you for giving me the chance to make things right." My heart softened. And I realized I was genuinely glad. Somehow, we had gone from being adversaries or at least rivals to being people who could talk, listen, and support each other when it mattered. As of now, life is calm. We're still living in my grandmother's apartment, which has truly become our home. Meanwhile, we've started building on our plot of land. Paul goes to kindergarten. This fall, he'll start a prep program for school. Margaret picks him up sometimes when we can't, and they've found their own rhythm. Her special methods now just mean reading fairy tales together in the evenings. No more notaries showing up at our door. No one's trying to tell me how to spend my money. And on my end, I help my in-laws when I can, like the time we chipped in together to send them on a health retreat. I do it now not out of guilt or fear, but simply because I want to. Sometimes, when I share old family stories, my friends ask, "Wait, your mother-in-law? The same one who used to be awful?" I smile and say, "Life changed and we changed with it." Most importantly, I learned to set boundaries and not let anyone cross them. That, I think, is the real outcome of this long story. My marriage to Nathan was tested by fire from my inheritance to his mother's influence, and the way we made choices together. But we came through stronger, more united than ever. We share the same goal now, to live with love, raise our children, and build a home. My financial independence is still intact. I still rent out the last apartment, which gives me a safety net. Since Margaret recovered, she's let go of a lot of her illusions. She's stopped believing money solves everything. She's come to see that what matters more is an honest relationship with her son and with me. That's the foundation we're trying to build on. Yes, we still see life differently, but the aggression and need to dominate are gone. Sometimes, I think back to those early days after the wedding, the very beginning, when Margaret showed up with a notary and demanded a prenup. I think how differently things could have turned out if I'd folded then or if I'd fought back too hard. Thankfully, I had the sense to stay quiet at the right moment, to protect what was mine, and to find a balance between independence and keeping peace in the family. I suppose you could call this a happy ending. No fairy dust, just a good, real-life kind of ending, the kind that feels earned. Looking ahead, we're planning to lay the foundation for our house next year. If we manage the budget wisely, maybe in a couple of years, we'll have the walls and roof up. Or it might take longer, and that's okay. The main thing is, we're doing it together, with no pressure from anyone. Sometimes I catch myself smiling, imagining us in our future home, sitting by the fireplace. Margaret's there too, peacefully chatting with me about garden flowers. Maybe she'll bake pies and tell Nathan how sweet Paul was as a kid, while Paul rides his bike through the yard. No more notaries. No more ultimatums. Just, a family. Of course, life doesn't guarantee smooth sailing. New challenges will come. But I've learned the most important lessons: protect your boundaries, learn to say no, and still stay kind. And if someone asks me, what's your biggest secret? I'd probably say know when to keep quiet about your money, and know when to give it freely, especially if it can save someone. That's the tricky art of family, where everyone deserves their own space, but no one forgets what it means to show up for each other. So yes, our story has been a journey. It started with that fateful knock at the door in the first week of our marriage. And now we have reconciled relatives, a son, and plans for the future. A lot could have gone wrong, but it didn't. And I can say with full confidence, when I got married, I didn't mention the 3 apartments I inherited from my grandmother. And thank God I kept quiet because just a week later, my mother-in-law showed up with a notary. That chapter is over now. Ahead of us lies a bright, wide-open future, one where we're no longer opponents, but a family.